Stanford University.
My name is Andy DiPaolo. I'm the Executive Director Emeritus of the Stanford Center for Professional Development and was a former Senior Associate Dean of the School of Engineering. I'm here today to interview George Springer. George and I have known each other for over 25 years, and it really is my pleasure to spend time with George today. The intent is to explore with George his experiences at Stanford and before Stanford, and to talk about his accomplishments, his challenges, and his viewpoints. Let me give you a little bit of background on George, and then we'll start with a series of questions, and then we'll just have a conversation. George is the Paul Piggott Professor of Engineering, Emeritus, and Aeronautics and Astronautics. He was also chair of that department from 1990 to 2001. His undergraduate degree is from the University of Sydney, and graduate degrees from Yale. Before he came to Stanford in 1983, he served on the faculties of MIT and the University of Michigan. His research focuses on the design of composite structures, including aircraft and spacecraft, sporting equipment, and biomedical devices. He's been a consultant to NASA, the U.S. Air Force and Navy, aerospace and automotive companies, America's Cup syndicates, has served as a director and senior technical advisor to Hexcel, the largest manufacturer of composite materials, and serves on the academic advisory board of Golf Digest. We'll come back to golf later on. George and I have had some fun with that. Professor Springer is a member of the U.S. National Academy of Engineering and a member of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. He's a fellow of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics and of the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, and in 1995 was named the U.S. Aerospace Engineer of the Year. He is the author, co-author, or editor of 12 books and over 200 technical papers. Professor Springer has also been a tank commander, played ice hockey, and raced sailboats for a living. Now, besides being an eminent researcher, George is a terrific teacher and advisor. So I went back and extracted a few comments about what his students have said about George in the past. So let me give you 3 of those. These are quotes.
You'll be surprised.
This is a surprise, George. You never know what could be said here, but this is interesting. These were quotes from students talking about Professor Springer. An interesting instructor. He explains things in an easy-to-understand fashion. He uses hands-on activities for learning and cares about his students. Another quote, he's practical and passionate, probably the best instructor I've had at Stanford. And the last is he has great anecdotes and one heck of a story to tell. So during our oral history today, we're going to test his storytelling skills while we explore his reflections and memories of his experience at Stanford. So George, I'm delighted you're joining me today for this conversation. So let's begin a little bit about your early life and background, and what was it like in your family, the kind of upbringing you had, education? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, my father was an engineer, mechanical engineer. So we were a middle-class family in Budapest, Hungary. And nothing special happened until the war, when my father was in the war. And at one time, towards the end of the war, for 6 months, we didn't know where he was, whether he was dead or alive. But even bigger, when we lived in apartments, big apartment complex, that turned out that the courtyard was an ammunition dump, and by accident, or non-accident, nobody knows, it blew up, and several hundred people died, and only a handful of us, about 20 or 30, survived.
How did you survive?
Because we were on the other side of the building. We didn't go down to the shelters, which were overcrowded and not very pleasant, and my mother said, the hell with it, and we happened to stay on the other side of the building, yes, because that's where our apartment was. And everything fell on us, but, including the ceilings and the walls, but the people on that side survived. And
how old were you
died? 11, and then the building went up in flames, and we could see the people burning and all that. So that was a horrifying experience. The war, and then after that came the Russians, and there was street fighting in Budapest that was as bad as Berlin or Stalingrad.
This is 1956?
55, January. People don't know that, but it was as bad. There are books written on it. was very, very bad. And
Go back. When were you in the role as a tank commander?
when I was at the university, it was compulsory for everybody to be in the military,
Yes.
and it was mechanical engineers were all in the armor,
Oh.
and so that's why I was in the armor, and we had it's kind of like ROTC at that point,
Yes.
where we go in and then we had summer training. That's what you saw the picture for a photograph.
Right, I did.
And then at the end, you had to go in for a couple of years, but that didn't happen because I escaped from Hungary before that happened. Just before.
You want to tell us about what happened? How you were able to get out?
Oh, there was a big revolution in 1956, probably the largest, almost the only one against the Russians. It was a big event, and in fact, at that year, a couple of months later, was New Year's Eve. Time magazine had American freedom fighters as the Man of the Year.
Mm.
So it was a big deal,
Mm-hmm.
and so an interesting thing, which I will tell you why people didn't believe the story. I went to the railroad station. I just had the clothes what I had on. Let me tell you first, before that, I had trouble deciding whether to go or not. I was a single, only child with my mother, so single. My father died a couple of years earlier. Didn't want to leave my mother,
Sure.
and I was 4 weeks before, or 6 weeks before getting my degree. So should I give up my degree and my mother and leave? And they might shoot me to death, which I don't know, along the way. So I was difficult to leave. But a few days before I made a decision, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Wasn't heroic, but they put me against the wall to be shot by the Russian soldiers.
Mm.
And I got out like you get out in a Western, It turns out that all the freedom fighters were dressed the same because that's the only type of clothing we had. It's like you look at Islamists or some they all look the same. We all look the same too.
Right.
So, and I was in the wrong place. They thought I was the one shooting at them, which I wasn't. But anyhow, then I decided better leave. So went to the railroad station and got into this terribly packed train. The interesting thing is, if you have seen in recently, just last few months, pictures from Budapest at the train station, the refugees coming up to Hungary and trying to get to
Yes.
the west. And I was exactly the same platform, the same pictures you've seen here with the mob. I was one
Yes,
of those mob,
Right.
1956.
And so there are masses
December.
of people trying to get out.
Get on the train. So we had no idea where the train rally is going to. I figured, so we went. So jam-packed on the train, got to near the border, and I'll tell you why I mentioned this, because then the train stopped, the conductor came, and all of those escaping get off here in the middle of nowhere. So the train emptied. And then we had a guy taking us. I just said what I was wearing, I had nothing on. And people say, oh, it's a likely story. And not long ago, I saw an article about Andy Grove, the Intel.
Yes, yes.
And he was telling that on the same date he got on this train, and it stopped, and the conductor and the same story. So I didn't know
Really?
him. I didn't know him, but he was on the same train.
Interesting.
And that's why I mentioned it in detail. So, and then we marched through that night, and we were being shot at. Randomly they were shooting, and flares went up. And the flares went up, you duck and then keep going. And the reason I mentioned it because at one of these shooting episodes, my buddy standing next to me stepped on my raincoat and he tore it, and I still have the raincoat.
Really?
And I
Oh.
sometimes pull out for the kids, and they say, "Dad, not to throw the raincoat."
Here comes that story again.
Yeah.
So you ended up in Austria?
I ended up in Austria, in Vienna, and then I wanted to go to Australia because I had an uncle there. My mother's brother was there,
Oh.
and a newspaperman came up to us and talked to us, a newspaperman, and said, "Oh, you should go to America." I said, "Why? I mean, what's the difference?" I was so naive that I thought that Haiti or New York was the same thing. I didn't know the difference. When we crossed the border, two things. Crossed the border, and I saw a box, a big box with some kind of, like an elephant trunk. I didn't know what it was. It was a gas pump. I never seen a gas pump. I was 23 years old. I saw much earlier where you pumped it with the hands, left and right, but I never saw one. And then I wanted to have a Coca-Cola because that was the... And somebody gave me I don't know, 50 cents or so. So first thing I was hungry. I ordered Coca-Cola. I was very disappointed. I thought it was an alcoholic drink. I was totally naive. I give you one other thing. We got some money, like 50 cents a day from various organizations, student helpers. I went to the movies.
Yes.
And I went to see Guys and Dolls.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And it was weeks later somebody explained to me that the character I thought was Frank Sinatra was not saying, what was his name? Marlon Brando, I think.
Oh, yes, that's right.
And Marlon. So I thought it was...
You confused the two.
I confused the two. I didn't know what they looked like.
Did you have any money? How did you survive?
I had not a penny, not a single penny, not because Hungarian money was not convertible. It was not, so it was, even if you had it, there's no point in taking out. You couldn't do anything with it. So we went in the morning, stood in line in various organizations, religious charities, various charities.
Yes.
They gave us a little money, and there was soup kitchen. So we went to soup kitchens and free meal. And then a couple took me in, and I slept on the bitter cold winter on the parquet floor. But I didn't have anything to, so I took down the brocade like this, curtain to cover myself up. So cold I was freezing. And all this time I had no change of clothes, same underwear, everything. And in fact, the same clothes, I took me 2 months ago to Australia, the same clothes, same underwear, everything.
So how did you get from Austria to Australia? How did that come about?
The Australians accepted 5,000 refugees. Australia then had the White Australia policy, no Asians. There's a policy. And they wanted, and many of the immigrants were Southern Europeans, and they wanted some Northern Europe, sort of.
Yes, right.
And so the first 5,000 they took. So I went there, stood in line, and I got a visa. And so they give me a card, which I have. I can show it to you. The card is about this big and it's torn, and that's what carried me from Vienna to Australia.
But you said you had a relative in Australia?
I had a relative who left in Hungary earlier. So that's how I got to Australia. They paid for it. The Australian.
The Australians paid.
Australians paid for it. They wanted us.
Right.
They did it with the English people, the British. You know, there was this.
Right.
They got free whatever if they promised to stay there. And I just want to tell you that we were in a cabin, 5 levels below deck, 12 of us, an area about this big. Nobody believes it. Well, I found Google on the map, the cabin with the 12 bunks. Yes. Yeah. The bunk I slept in, I found.
Oh, no kidding.
This with 12 young men. None of them had a shower in 6 weeks because we had to go around the Cape. Suez was closed.
That's right.
So we just went around, nothing, no change of clothes, nothing.
Must have been quite an aroma in that little cabin. Huh?
Yes, and you may want to cut it later. But my bunk was incredibly stinky. I didn't know what happened, but it was terrible. And the last day, of course, nobody changed the sheets or anything.
Yes, sir.
And last day, turned out that he put his socks in my pillowcase. I mean, that's how I went to Australia.
So but you didn't speak English, or not very well.
No, I didn't speak a word of English.
No English?
Not an English.
So what happened? I know you wanted to go on to school, right?
I wanted to go to school, and so there was a technical institute at the time. It became a university later. I went to a university. In Hungary, there were not universities like here. There's technical university, medical
like
university.
Polytechnic kind of thing.
Yeah, all. Right. They said, forget it. Started first year. Well, I had 4.5 years already.
I see.
So my uncle, who thought he could speak English, but he couldn't, went to Sydney University. And I said, I don't want to go to Sydney University. I don't have anything in university. What's a university? Well, we went over there, and the guy explained to me there's a problem. Well, there are 3 problems. The school already started 4 weeks ago or something, so you're late, right? You don't have money, and tuition and what have you, and you don't speak a word of English. Well, we can't start the school over for you. Literally, that's what happened. We can't give you money. That's your problem. But next week, this was the Thursday, next Tuesday is the exam for foreign students. If you pass it, you can enroll.
Huh?
So I have the letter. I don't ever see it's on my desk. Have you ever seen
I've
it?
seen it.
You have seen the letter?
Yeah, right.
Where it said, Mr. Springer, we are pleased to inform you that you passed the English test and you may now enroll. However, the examiner recommends that you, in best interest, learn English as quickly as possible.
So between Thursday and Tuesday, you acquired enough basic language to do something.
Well, I was just cramming words into my head and had a little written and speak, so I just couldn't. I mean, they wanted to. I was the only Hungarian.
That's very good. So you were admitted to the University of Sydney into
Yes.
the mechanical engineering program?
Yeah, third year of mechanical engineering.
And so then you went through the
junior
program.
year, yes.
Obviously, your English improved. You got better at it. And then you had to make a decision. What were you going to do after the university? What was your plan? And what did you end up doing?
Well, I had no idea. And I really had no idea, because we had to do some practical work. That was part of the university, and I worked for Carrier Air Conditioning. Carrier, who is now in
Yes.
the news lately,
Yes.
they had outsourced to Australia then. And so they hired me. I was the only university student, almost graduated. It was sort of a few weeks before it got. And I was crawling. First of all, I was helping install the ducts.
Oh, really?
And I was very envious for the young mean people there with white clothes throwing asbestos around. They looked very fancy. I don't know if anyhow, I was doing that. And then the results of the finals appeared in the newspapers.
Oh,
That's how you found out your grades.
oh, interesting. Yeah.
And the largest Australian company, Colonial Sugar, there was that and the Broken Hill, which is the mining, so these were the two, called me in, said they want to talk to me when I saw the newspapers. So they said they would like to hire me. I said, that's very nice, but I really would like to study further for just a master's degree.
Right.
I said, sorry. Then they called me back again. I said, in the meantime, I got an assistantship at University of New South Wales, the other university, for a master's degree and a teaching assistantship. And I said, but then I heard that you could come to the States, so I thought I'd come to the States. I would have liked to come to the States. I learned from somebody at a party. I went to a party and somebody just came back. I said, where you come? Oh, I didn't know you can go. So I went to the consulate and started looking in books, and I had no clue.
Right.
And I never no idea. I went to the chairman of the department, and he says, yes, they do, but they don't need another Hungarian. That's exactly what he said. So anyhow, then I said, but I want overseas. I said, no way. I said, okay, thank you.
Right.
So then called me back. I said, okay, you can go overseas. And we pay you, we hire you, and we send you as an employee. I said, fine, but I don't want to guarantee that I come back. I don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
Sorry. Okay,
Right.
went away. Called me back. I said, okay, you can go.
With no obligation to return?
If you don't come back, you don't come back.
Well, that's
so
very generous.
it's very generous. And
then you ended up applying to schools.
I started applying to school.
And zeroed in on Yale?
No, I applied to MIT, Caltech here, Berkeley, Michigan.
Yes.
And I got everywhere in it, all of them. And I met another guy who said, go to Yale. And I didn't. I said, it's terrific. So I said, okay. Good thing was I didn't have to pay $10 or something as a deposit.
Yeah, right.
It turned out later that he went to Yale.
Oh.
that was as easy as that. So I ended up at Yale.
So you worked your way through 2 master's degrees and then a PhD.
Yeah, but that was at Yale.
Yeah.
All of it at Yale.
And then you ended up going to your first job was at MIT?
Yeah.
How did you end up there?
Well, I'm almost embarrassed to say that because the dean at MIT, Gordon Brown, was a graduate of Sydney University. And when when I was there as a senior, he came once he was visiting. He happened to be visiting, and he asked him to talk to the seniors.
Yeah.
And he got in and drew a circle and said, here is Sydney and here's MIT. And that's the only reason you look up at MIT, because you're down here, down under. So when I was graduating at Yale, I wrote him a letter, which I still have. I can show you the copy of the letter in my file. Dear Dean Brown, when you were at Sydney 2 years ago, you told us this story about, now I got as far as New Haven, but I'm still about 150 miles short of seeing the validity of it. Could I get a job? The next thing I was asked for an interview. So, I mean, that's maybe called chutzpah.
Yes, yes.
So that's how I got to MIT.
And then you went to MIT. You were hired at MIT, and what was your specialty at that point? And did you not work on emissions control or something?
No. You're 2 steps ahead.
Oh, well, tell me.
I was at Yale, and I was working on heat transfer, which was basically an idea that you melt a material, certain material. I mean, this is type of a material, some chemical.
Yes.
That when a satellite is in the sunshine, you melt it, and when it goes in a dark side, it freezes, and while it freezes, it gives out heat, and you can use this then to heat the satellite or whatever. That was before batteries became good.
Right.
But it never went into practice because it was superseded by batteries.
Right.
But that's what I was doing. But that, of course, wasn't too much interested. And then I went to MIT and was to work with Shapiro was the name, very famous professor. He was one of the 3 institute professors or so. And I was his assistant professor, so to speak.
Yes.
And he was the boss. And he gave me a list of topics to pick.
Oh.
Not topics, fields. I knew nothing from any one of them.
Right.
They were all brand new. But that was a space age, beginning of, Sputnik was just 2 years earlier, or 3. So I said, okay, molecular gas dynamics, which is flying in space. And that's what I did. So much so that when I came here to Stanford, was it 20-some years later, Charles Kruger was the head of mechanical engineering.
That's right.
And when I went to XCOM, where they decide hires, he saw my name and he says, I know George Springer from MIT, but he was a molecular gas dynamics space guy, not a composites and structures guy. That's not the same guy.
Yeah, right.
So then I went to Michigan, and there, by that time, this space age was pretty much, this interesting stuff were over. And being in Michigan auto industry, I started doing environmental effects, automotive and the environment, and that's what I.
Because of the close connection to the auto industry.
Yes,
right.
And then I became, which was an interesting sideline, the chief technical advisor to the United Auto Workers, and very interesting stories going to Washington and testify and with them and
At the House Committee?
oh yes,
Oh.
yeah, very very interesting stories. But anyhow, that's what I did. But that's kind of so there was a Ralph Nader, and after that big deal. But that's died out. Every topic sort of dies out in 10 years or so.
Right.
And then the Air Force was interested in because of my background in fluid mechanics, which was fluid gas dynamics, on effects of moisture on composites which were coming in, because composites are plastics.
Yes.
And when airplanes fly through it high speed, it's like little bullets hitting the plastic, and that happened with airplanes in Vietnam, with a very humid environment and rain. So I started doing that, and that's how I got into composite, and that was the end of the. So it fed into that.
Right. So you took advantage of an opportunity as
yes, that's
something
right.
was changing.
That changes.
So you went from there with your beginning of studying composites, and then you went from Michigan. And what caused you then to leave Michigan to think about coming to Stanford?
Well, again, you can cut out part of the story if you
Oh,
want.
well, we want it all.
But I knew they were looking for somebody in structures. But because I wasn't in structures, I was in composite, but you know what happens to composite, but not when it gets in moisture in it and heated and whatever. So I never applied. And we went to Tokyo for a big international meeting, my wife and I. Very tired in those days, from Ann Arbor to New York to Tokyo. We arrive, and Susan, my wife, says, "Let's go sleep." I said, "Well, the big banquet is, let's go downstairs." So we go down there, in the door, as we go in there, stands an elderly couple, never met them before. It was Nicholas Hoff and his wife.
Oh.
Now, Nicholas Hoff was the one who founded, and we might get to that if time permits, how the department founded. He founded the department.
That's right.
And turned out later he was Hungarian, and turned out even more important, he was the chairman of the search committee for this job. So I talked to him a few minutes only, and when we went back to Ann Arbor, I told him how nice it was to meet him, which was really very, very nice. And I said, "By the way, here is my resume. If you think it's appropriate, why don't you put it together with the others?" I forgot about it.
Right.
And the rest is history.
So then Nicholas and other members of the search committee brought you out to interview, and
Yes.
was it difficult to leave Michigan to come to Stanford, or what was the difference between Michigan and here? What were the opportunities that you did
Well,
have?
it was very difficult because my friend Jim Duderstadt, whom you know was the dean,
Right.
and he was trying to revitalize Michigan, because after the war they hired a lot of people because students came in, but they needed fresh blood,
Yes.
and they wanted to hire some superstars. And so here I was saying I'm leaving. So they offered me things that were very, very, very attractive,
Yes.
put it this way. And so it was very difficult. And one daughter was born, and the other was 2 years old, so we knew everybody in town. We were very much home.
Right.
So my wife, when heard about this, "Oh no," she says, "I'm not going." And the kids said, "I'm not going." So it was very, very difficult. And I was really not an easy decision.
And I'm just looking at it was in 1983.
Yes.
I believe that's
Yes,
what
yes.
happened. So what caused you to make, was the offer then sufficiently attractive, or what was going on in the department at the time that got your interest?
Well, Stanford, what really got me interested was the graduate program. I mean, Stanford has the graduate department and the research. The research is what interested me very much. Because you knew Chuck West?
Yes, I did.
So
You're from MIT, right?
Yeah, Chuck West, a good friend of mine, and he was the senior associate dean, and I told him, "Chuck, you want to become an administrator. I want to be just a small research group. You get much better students at Stanford, and it's much easier to do it. That's why I want to go."
And was your intent to come and just do research, not even get
No,
involved
no,
in
no,
administrative
no.
work?
I had absolutely no intention to be an administrator. So much so that when I first of all, when Gibbons asked me to, call me in and it was a search and sort of would I take the job or whatever offered me, or
Right.
and I said because they interview every faculty member. I said I only take the job if there was not a single person who objected.
Oh.
I'm not going to go into that.
Right.
So I didn't. And my friends all said, "George, I never thought you'd do it. You don't want to be it." And I didn't want to be.
When you came here, were there other people in the department, in either Aeroastro or mechanical, working on composites besides yourself?
No.
So you were the first.
I was the first, yes. That's why I brought them in. There was a visiting committee who recommended that you do composites.
Right. But nobody else. So you were the one who
I was
came
the-
to Stanford
yes,
and began
yes,
the research
that's right.
agenda in
Yes,
composites.
yes.
And who was chair at that time? Was it
Bob Cannon.
Bob Cannon. And then what were those early days like for you when you came to the department? What was the nature of the department in terms of its climate or cooperative behaviors or difficulties or not around finance? What was it like at that time when you came?
I have to start with one thing which is absolutely unique. It's the most congenial department Nicholas Hoff, who started the department,
Yes.
he was a wonderful man, and Bob Cannon continued. It was the friendliest. Everybody was out to boost everybody else.
Great.
So Holt Ashley, who's, you remember,
Of course I know Holt,
he
yes.
went around. I learned it from him. He promoted everybody. He found them important committee jobs, which for visibility, he nominated them for everything. I mean, he was always nominating. Very friendly, everybody. I've never seen that happen before.
Yeah, we know
and
it.
it's still that way.
In many academic institutions, there's not department collegiality. In fact, it's the exact opposite. So it sounds like
It is
you had a
fantastic.
very good experience. here.
Fantastic. It couldn't be better. Couldn't have been better then, and it couldn't have been better now.
And then, as you advanced with the new area for Stanford Composites, was it we were able to acquire enough grants and contracts to support students? And was that easy or difficult to get started with that?
At that time, I didn't even know that there was such a thing as a startup package. And there was some very, very old First World War equipment. And that was the most difficult part was throwing them out, because people said, we need those, you can't throw them out. But I didn't know, so I got $30,000, which was more than today, but it wasn't a big amount. And then I brought in all money from Lockheed and other places and build up the lab.
And then did you work with any other faculty members in cooperation across from ME or any other departments?
Not really. Then Cannon said that we should hire another one, and that's when we hired Foucault Cheng, who is now
Foucault Cheng, yes.
He was my student at Michigan.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
And what
He
was your
a PhD
relationship
student.
with Steve Tsai?
Well, Steve Tsai was the first person I met when I arrived in this country. He was a student at Yale, and the very first or second day I went to register, and there was like Skilling Auditorium.
Yes.
That's where the registration was. And I didn't know what to do. I had papers. I had no idea what to do. And I looked, but I knew I wanted to take full load because I want to get out of here. And I look over and I see that Steve Tsai is only taking one course. I didn't know him. I just see that, and this guy smoking with crew cut. I said, this dumb Chinese, he's not smart enough to take two courses. And I've never seen an Asian in my life. The first Asian I've seen.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So within 2 days we became best friends.
Right.
And the reason he took only one course was totally finished, but at that time for a PhD you needed a language exam, or actually two.
Yes.
And that's the only thing was left for him to get his degree. So he was signed up for a language exam. And so we became best of friends.
And I know you still do a lot of work with him, right?
Yeah, well, his office is right next to me.
I know.
But then he went to the Air Force.
Yes.
And then when he retired from the Air Force, he came here as a research professor, and he's still here.
So I want to go back to the early days. One of your colleagues, when I had sent a note around asking them about might there be questions to ask, somebody said that suggested you should talk about Stephen Timoshenko, who's known as the father of applied mechanics. Any relationship with him, and was there any stories around his work and you?
No, well, Timoshenko I never met him. He was dead by the time. He was in Michigan for a while, and then came to Stanford, from which he retired. And Professor Geer in civil engineering
Yes.
knew him very well as a student. I wrote books with him and his life story. So if you want to learn about Timoshenko, Jim Geer is the one to talk.
Okay.
Because all my stories will be second and third hand.
All right. So let's go off from
Yes.
him. So
but let me say this, that until Timoshenko in this country, mechanical engineering was nuts and bolts. And he was the one who brought in the theory and
Yes.
we could call it science, but it's put it on scientific grounds and not just looking at how this is big enough.
So when you think about the work you're doing in composites, today we consider it as commonplace, right? Everything from airplanes to golf clubs and natural. But early on, when you got involved, when in your career did you think this was going to be a practical technology and would have widespread use? What was happening in your mind at that point to make you think that?
Steve Tsai was at the Air Force, and he was promoting composites.
He was working for the Air Force at that time.
He was a chief scientist of the Air Force Materials Lab.
Oh.
And he was pushing composites. And he was telling me, get into composites, you know, as a friend, we were state
Yes.
friends. I was in Michigan at the time, and I said, you know, I know nothing about composites. And in 1972, he organized a very big conference in Los Angeles and told me to come. Everybody was there, but they discussed the future of composites.
Yes.
And that was the starting point of our composites field. A lot of people noticed that's the
In 1972?
72,
Right.
the key. It was LA Airport, and everybody was there, and NASA and all that.
Where was there a particular universities who had a focal point for composites? Was
Not
it here,
yet,
elsewhere?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not
Okay.
yet. Not that I can. I can't think of one.
Yes.
There may have been, but I don't want to. Somebody come back. Yes, but nothing to.
So it was still very much an evolving, developing
Evolving,
field.
Right. So I really got in at the beginning, and the way I got in, I remember I was in fluid mechanics and heat transfer, and one was the interaction of raindrops called rain erosion, which hit the composites.
Yes.
Remember, and the interaction of water, and I wrote a book on that, which is transported in Russian too. So hitting it and eroding the airplane, you know,
Yes.
it's
Right,
like that.
pounding on the
Pounding
structures. Yeah.
And then when you make a composite, it is basically epoxy, which is glue.
Mm-hmm.
And I put fibers in there, which are very strong, the glue is. So glue holds these fibers, strong fibers together, and that's a material. But just like when you have a glue, you heat it up with a hairdryer to harden faster.
Yes.
This material is also soft.
Oh.
And then you have to heat it. Now we're talking of an heating oven that is the size of this building, so a whole Boeing airplane wing can fit into it.
Right.
And in addition to heat it, that you put some pressure to press it together, so the layers and the fibers and the glue together, so you don't come apart and don't look like baklava or something.
Right. Right.
So you have to heat it and to cook it.
Yes.
Right? And under pressure. And these are huge ovens. I mean, enormous ovens.
Like 787 wings would go into ovens like that.
Yes. Give you a size.
Right.
And so you have to heat it, not just turn the heat on, but you have to be very careful. A little more heat, a little less heat, so you constantly have to watch how you do it. And that's, they used to do it by trial and error, and if it's no good, throw it away and then try again. And that's where I got into it, developing some rational basis on using mathematics and physics to develop how to manufacture.
And where did your
these
research
parts.
money come for this?
It started coming from Steve, from the Air Force. Not Steve, but the Air Force,
Yes.
the materials laboratory. And then later from the Navy. So those were the two
Right.
and NASA.
Right. So you had government support for your
Government.
research. And then you began to attract groupings of students who would want to work with you over time.
Because there was a very, very growing field.
Right.
So that was exploding at the time.
So how many students would you have, like in your typical lab setting? How would PhD students?
Well, I can
be
give you a
working
couple of numbers. And this is, you asked me why I came here.
Yes.
At Michigan, I had about 3 at any given time, which was about as high as anybody, or maybe very few people did.
Mm.
And when I came here, I had 15.
Wow.
And totally, my total production lifetime, I had 60.
Wow. That's an impressive number.
60
of
PhDs.
students.
Well, at Stanford, a lot of people do that.
Right.
I must mention the last one, because I had a 60th.
I have a question, but
Okay.
you tell me about the last PhD student, because one of your
You can-
colleagues said I
oh.
should ask that question.
Well, you asked a question, no.
Yeah. Well, the question you tell me now about
Oh.
there was something about his last exam.
No, that was a defense, the last step.
Right.
of
And
defense.
what happened there?
So I went in there in a tuxedo. But, you know, I photographed a
Yes.
tuxedo, completely informal, and some champagne.
Yes.
And then we celebrated at the end, and everybody thought that I was celebrating him, but I didn't. I celebrated myself.
because it was your
my
last one. That's funny. I'm trying to think who. I think it was Jeff Kosef who said I should ask that question. So
Yeah.
I'm glad
Yeah.
that I didn't.
Yeah.
Well, good. It was a nice surprise answer. So we've talked a bit about your research agenda, and as you've gone forward with that, let's talk a little bit about the teaching side at that point. So. In talking with your colleagues and other students, that they all say that you are witty, you're practical, you're humorous, but you're deeply founded in science and engineering. And can you talk a little bit about the courses you taught as part of the AA curriculum?
Okay, I tell you, but let me just tell you about how funny and humorous. It's not universally appreciated because I got comments that you read before. I thought you read that. If you want to hear a stand-up comic, I go to Las Vegas. so there's, two sides.
You always want some laughter no matter what you do, so you brought that. That's funny.
so anyhow, well, as I said, that I taught so many subjects. I started teaching undergraduate and graduate heat transfer, thermodynamics.
Yes.
These are subjects I taught.
Yes.
I have a whole shelf of books, notebooks, notes that I wrote on this. Fluid mechanics, undergraduate, graduate. Right. Gas dynamics, molecular gas dynamics, which is to do the space one. Then I came here, I taught composites and structures. So it's about 10 subjects and very wide range.
Yeah, it is. You cover a lot of the curriculum in the areas there.
Yes.
That's impressive that you're able to do that. And then as you taught, and you think about one of the questions that came up was, John Hennessy said, he said I should ask you about your golf game, but I thought no. He said I should give you a question on teaching freshman seminars. Is there something you want to talk about that?
Oh, I know why you said that.
Yo, tell me.
So our department, I'm just flabbergasted. I mean, stuck. Hennessy would do that. That's also speechless.
Well, I said, to give you some sense, I sent a note to about 30 people, and John came back and asked George about that.
Okay, so to begin, let me give a few steps.
Yeah, please.
When I came here, Chuck Steele took me over to the dean, who was Dean Case.
Yes.
Introduced me, just to introduce. And so Case asked me, what compelling reason you have to come here? And then Chuck cut in and said he has no compelling reason. In fact, he has a lot of uncompelling reasons because what Michigan is offering him.
Yes.
And then they said, would you teach undergraduates? Because our department had no undergraduates, and I'm coming to these freshman seminars, and nobody wanted to teach undergraduates.
Yeah, it was strictly a graduate program.
Yeah, still is.
Yeah.
Which we should come back to later.
Yes.
Remember that.
Yeah.
And so, would I teach? I said, of course. I always taught. Every quarter, all my year, I have an undergraduate, a graduate, and I like to teach them. But when I came here, there was not that much opportunity. A couple of courses engineers taught, so I volunteered to teach freshman seminars, and I did, and it turned out incredibly rewarding. I had many students who did very well. In fact, yesterday I had lunch from one of my old freshman seminar student who just came back from Rio, where she did very well in sailing. And then now what he refers to is, I think that one day, Hennessy, I got an email which says, "Hey dude, do you want to come to the faculty dinner?" So you know that they invite faculty.
Yes, I do, yes.
Presumably the faculty they like. And this was two freshman women. So hey dude, I didn't know what to do, so I asked my daughter, I said, go. I was flabbergasted, I didn't know what to say.
Yes.
And I went, it was a very pleasant evening. So ever since then, I'm the dude.
Yeah, well, not Professor Springer, we'll call you Dude Springer.
Yeah, so that's I think that's what he's referring to.
That's funny. Then the other one was Dick Christensen. He said, he was the one who asked me to ask you about the final exam, and that's what it was, tuxedo.
Dick Christensen was at Yale with us too.
Really?
Yeah.
So now let's shift a little bit from the teaching and the research to your work in industrial relations. You know, you've had a long-standing relationship with companies and with government agencies like Boeing and Lockheed and others, but as has the department. Can you talk a little bit about when you came here, and has it evolved over time with those relationships that the department or maybe you've had with industry? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I had a long-standing relationship with Lockheed, Sunnyvale here.
Yes. The Missiles and Space Group?
Missiles and Space Group. And they were doing submarine missiles, and that was I was consulting on. Basically my job there was that the customer was the Navy, and I was sort of the buffer between them. Namely, the Navy wanted certain things that Lockheed, so I was the one sort of smoothing the road out a little bit between them. Could we do this? Could we do that? Right. So I was just sort of the technical referee, so to speak.
Yes.
It was a very interesting job. That was. I also had NASA, which was very interesting. I was on a space shuttle subcommittee, space transportation. Sorry, but it was basically the shuttle.
Yes. This is before the Challenger explosion, or
before?
Yes. Before
the Challenger explosion, and when it exploded, we was watching at home, and I told my wife, the seal gave out.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Because I had some things in my file where our committee said that there's a problem with the seal.
That was the Morton-Thiokol problem, was it? I think the seal was in low temperature or something.
Yes, but the problem was the NASA. Now here, I don't know if I want to talk on record.
Okay, then we don't have to talk about that.
Let's talk, but I'm not sure on record.
All right.
We would spend a lot of time down at Huntsville, where some Germans were still there.
Yes.
And Jim Marr, who was the head of our committee at the time, of this particular committee, said, the trouble with the NASA people, that they learned from the German the arrogance, but not the technical stuff.
Oh. Oh.
Right. And that was the problem. And the reason there was that happened because I don't know how much we should leave in here in this, but I tell you.
As much as you want to talk.
Well, we'll see. Vandenberg.
Yes.
They wanted to shoot rockets up from, because that was or they could get in a certain orbit they wanted to get in.
From here on California
side. That's why they were building it. And the Air Force wanted to, I don't know the politics, but the Air Force wanted to take over the program. And they said, you guys can only fly NASA when the weather is nice and everything is right. And with Air Force, we don't have that luxury.
Oh, interesting.
So NASA said, we'll show it to you. So when the thing was frozen, we have to fly.
Oh, that's an interesting take on that, right? So that as a result, they went up what they shouldn't have.
They shouldn't have. So that was sort of behind.
So were you involved in any of the follow-up?
When there was a committee I wasn't on, but I had one experience which was probably the most responsible thing I've done besides deciding to escape from Hungary. After the Challenger accident, they finally got to a point where everything was ready to take off the next one after that.
Yes.
And our committee, so happened, I was representing at NASA headquarters. It's a huge room, huge horse-shaped room. Here the administrator sits here, and I was sitting here, and all the presidents of the company, and they discussed, could we fly, couldn't we fly, what's the sense? And finally, he turns to me, and you represented the committee, you give it a final word, can we fly or can we not fly?
Really?
And
really?
I said, fly,
Wow.
And it turned out. And I became very good friends with the astronaut who was in charge of the next flight.
Didn't you want to be an astronaut at one time?
Yes, I did.
Tell me about that.
Well, they came out as a scientist and astronaut program when I went to MIT. It was the 60s.
Yeah. Just when the Apollo program and Gemini and
yes,
Mercury,
yes,
all
yes.
that was beginning to develop.
63, 64, scientist and astronaut. I believe 900 applicants or so. And I said, I have to apply. I mean, I have to prove myself that at least I tried.
And you were an athletic guy, having been an ice skater, so you felt like you had the physical requirements.
And I was younger.
Right, of course, yeah.
And so my most memorable thing was I had to go to a physical exam, and the first time I had a prostate exam. I never forget that. So yeah, so
That's funny. So what happened when you?
so I got letters and letters and letters, and first I got printed and then mimeographed and whatever.
You were at MIT then.
MIT, yes. But I figured I got, I don't know, but a low number. But I didn't make the final cut. 9 people
Oh.
were selected out of 900, and as I recall, all of them were either physicians or geologists, because they had to be to space travel. What does it do for health?
Yes.
Or moon rocks. And of those, I think 4 ever flew. And there's a big scandal in newspapers, everything else, because the others got very upset that they spent all this time of their lives training it for nothing.
Yes. Interesting.
So that was my experience.
Had you become an American citizen by then, or not? When did you become a citizen?
No, I wasn't a citizen then yet.
Was that an issue of that you were?
Well, I told everybody that at that time that the reason they didn't want to take me, I mean tongue in cheek,
Yes.
because they wouldn't see the headline in the New York Times, the first American to the moon is a Hungarian.
Well, so I was curious about, maybe they were only looking
No.
at, now it's multinational, anybody goes, but back then
By the
I
time
wonder-
I would have flown, I would have been.
an American.
Yeah,
Yeah.
at that time I wasn't, but I became a citizen in 66.
66. So I always like to talk to people who become citizens. You probably know more about American history, having had to study it to pass the exam, than most Americans, right? I mean,
Yeah, I did that, yeah.
It was pretty straightforward. Going back to on the industry side, anything within the department that you can reflect on about the relationship industry has had with the department? I know many years ago, I believe in the 30s, industry helped save. By then, it wasn't a department; it was just affiliated with the school. But companies came together where they each gave $5,000 to help the department evolve and get better. Can you talk a little bit about the industry side and its?
Well, let's go back to the beginning.
Yes.
A couple of interesting things there. As you said, the department was kind of a group in mechanical engineering.
Right.
Niles was one of the professors I know
Yes.
was there. There was another one whose name escapes me now.
Yeah.
But then Lockheed led the way, and I know some other industries, but Lockheed was the lead. That do you have to have on the East Coast? Remember, the East Coast, it was 58, mid 50s, aircraft, not space yet, blooming. And you have Caltech here, but it's very, very tiny, really very small, few students, concentrating more on the science side, not the engineering. I mean, they are fantastic. So let's have another one on the West Coast. By that time, travel was very difficult. It took 2 days to go to the East Coast, to Washington.
Right.
And Lockheed and Thurman talked to Thurman, who was there, and he said, we'll pay for it. And they said, okay, we'll try. And this I heard this is firsthand, Nicholas Hoff told me this. They went to von Karman, who is very famous, he was the most famous aeronautical engineer at Caltech, who should lead the effort. And he said, well, there's only one person, is Nicholas Hoff, who was a Stanford grad,
Yes.
Timoshenko student, who was head of at Brooklyn Polytech.
Yes.
So they went to Nicholas Hoff, and Thurman went to see Nicholas Hoff. Thurman was that kind of a guy. In those days, it was
that kind of guy, right.
not easy to go out to the East Coast. But somehow the conversation didn't go very well. Now, Nicholas Hoff told me this, so it's... And so he felt, well, they don't, if that's so, forget it. So he wrote a letter thanking Thurman to come out. There's no email. And he said, but looks like there's not a good match, and thank you very much.
Right.
And within 24 hours or whatever, Thurman said, no. I understand what you think. The reason I was so I don't know, reticent or whatever the correct word is, I'm not sure, because I thought you really wanted to go so badly, and I didn't want you.
Really?
Yes. You don't want people to just go. And and then he hired Nicholas, and and the first person they offered the job was Vincenti.
Walter Vincenti. Yes.
Who, again, I heard it from him, so these are first-hand
That's
stories, not
Good.
second-hand.
Yes.
And he said, I don't want to come, I don't want to be chairman. That's not my... But if you have a chairman, I come and work. So that's
So he said to Hoff, if you're chair, I'll come and work up with you.
yes.
Interesting.
But he didn't want. First, they asked him
Yes.
because he was at Ames.
Uh-huh.
Vincent was a Stanford grad who was recruited to Ames when the
So what are we
working there.
talking about? What era is this? This is in the 50s?
no. Well, this is 50s, but he was working there during the war.
Oh, I see.
Quite a few of them came from who worked there at the war during the war.
Right.
They were drafted and were military there,
Yes.
and so that's where they worked in uniform.
So is that when Hoff was here and Vincenti was here? Was that when other companies began to really become
Yes.
associated with the department?
Yes. And Hoff was very, very good. He was very well known. He was a very famous guy,
Right.
and he was an airplane designer.
Oh.
So he knew airplanes, and he did a lot of structures of the airplane.
Yes.
So he had a very good contacts everywhere, and
And is that when sort of it was the basis of the industrial affiliates program?
yes, the industrial affiliates program they started. I'm not sure he started it. It probably was, but then Canon fostered
Bob
it.
Cannon picked up and went from
Yes.
there. This is good. So.